Well, welcome to my Citation 5, 555 Echo Hotel. I'm going to do a little bit of a walk around, not a complete one, but show some of the features of the airplane, what you look for on the walk around. Maybe something that's unique to the legacy ones. I'm not sure, I don't know all the other ones that well, but we'll point out some things that are maybe different. First thing we do is we start here at the door. It has a double door seal actually. Most people think it's the outer door seal you got to look at, and you got to look at that, but the inner door seal is actually the one that kind of inflates, and so you kind of check around and make sure that's all intact all the way around. And then we come up here, check the windows. Got bleeder heat for the windows, so you got to be careful not to use that on the ground because it melts the window. And then you got backup alcohol coming out of these if you need to. Never have to use that. The bleeder does a good job taking care of the ice and stuff. Baggage compartment is pretty nice and big. A little messy right now. My little toolbox that we have for little things. You can get a few suitcases in there. Come around here, check the nose wheel, of course, and then so over here is where you have a lot of the gauges that you'd want to check on pre-flight. That's pretty common to most Citations. Don't think they've changed a lot of that, but up here you got the sight gauge for the windshield alcohol, of course. You got the emergency extension nitrogen bottle. It's in the green. It's actually a little higher pressure. It's warm today. And then you got the power brake accumulator right here. It's got the pre-charge. You can see that here. And then brake fluid sight gauges. It's high on both because we don't have the parking brake gauge. So that's all good. A little different than some airplanes maybe. Come around here. Angle of attack, of course, emergency door, got the engines. This is maybe unique. I don't know if there's many airplanes that have the hybrid wing. It's got a heated wing in here at the wing root where it's critical, and then it has the boots on the outside. And that's a nice job getting rid of the ice in icing conditions. This, of course, stays free, and then this does a nice job getting it off when you get it. And same thing with the elevator, you got boots back there. Some have heated elevators, but that one have boots. Doesn't really have anything on the vertical, doesn't really need it. And then obviously the engine inlets are heated as they are in most of these airplanes. It's got a beautiful long wing. It has great flying characteristics, handles turbulence incredibly well. And with a sleek wing like this, you get pretty good speed out of this thing. About 385 to 410, depending on what altitude and what power settings. But it's pretty steady at about 400. Yeah, so this airplane has about 5,800 pounds of fuel in there, which can take you about 3.5, 4 hours, about 1,600 nautical miles, maybe 1,700, depending on weather and stuff. So it's got a huge range. It also, even with 5,800 pounds, this one has the gross weight increase. So it gets about 1,400 pounds payload, maybe 1,500. I got to look at the weight and balance, but it's roughly in that range with the gross weight increase. So you can take full fuel and probably 5 to 6 passengers at least, depending on baggage and weights and stuff. So to fly this single pilot, what you need is a single pilot exemption, and there's some requirements. I think you have to have commercial certificate, certain number of hours, I believe at 1,000, and then you have to be trained every year with a single pilot exemption certified training provider that then gives you the single pilot exemption. It's pretty straightforward, adds about half a day to the training, and what you do is you fly the simulator a few approaches by yourself and make sure that you can handle radio and all that stuff, so it's pretty straightforward. One thing that's slightly different with these airplanes is you can't really check the oil all that well before takeoff because it's one of those where you gotta wait till 10 minutes after landing to check the oil. But what I typically do on takeoff, I just make sure at least it's dripping here, right? That gives me some comfort that we have oil, but I generally check it when we're done with the flight, after I've done the walk around after flight and stuff, and then make sure that it's at the right spot. It varies a little bit, so it's one of those things when it gets low, you fill it, but you don't sweat the little minute variations because that will happen depending on when you check it. This is one of my favorite features of this airplane. It's the thrust reversers, and You know, I flew a Citation 1 with the Williams engines and flew it around the Midwest in the winter, and this gives me a lot of comfort on wet and icy runways. Just another help when it comes to braking and landing performance. Obviously all the landing distances are calculated without the use of thrust reversers in this airplane, but you do have an added safety feature here, which is you're slightly independent of the runway characteristics. So it helps a lot. I love it. I really appreciate them. Good to have. Back here we talked about the wing and the elevator and the boots and the vertical stabilizer. Nothing particular here. I will now show you the least attractive feature of the legacy Citations. I think most of them are like this. It's called the battery connect in the hellhole, and it is a pain in the rear, let's just say, and I'll show you what it looks like. First of all, you get in here, and I'll let you get a shot afterwards, but you get in here, and then you basically screw up your back by kind of coming in here, and in the dark, which is usually as you got to connect the battery back in here, and come back out, and then you have to kind of afterwards you have to take this thing down and plug it all back together, check all the static specs, all that kind of stuff. But you know, you just gotta love this aircraft. It's just such a beautiful, well-flying aircraft, and it just looks good on the ramp. It's sleek and looks like it has long legs, which it does have. So it's really good. Funny thing, when I bought this aircraft, it came with lockable gas caps, which I never used, but good to have if you go to a country where people steal gas. My favorite part is my vanity plates. It was a Mexican registered aircraft, so I had to get a new tail number, and I just happened to stumble across 555 Echo Hotel and decided to get it. So one of the things you see on legacy Citations is these stall strips. You might see them on some other of the newer Citations too, but these stall strips. So in my Citation 1 that I had, it didn't really have a stick shake or anything. The only thing you got from stall was the actual buffet of the aircraft from the stall strips. This one has that, but it also has an angle of attack and a stick shaker, so that helps. But no light, no oral warnings or anything like that. And some of the basic legacy Citations have just the stall strip and the buffet that comes with it. Well, welcome to the cockpit of my Citation 5. We're going to go through the startup procedures here from when I enter the cockpit after having done the pre-flight. So the first thing I do is come in here and get seated and start over here and basically connect my oxygen mask on my side, and then do a left to right sweep backed up with a checklist of breakers. Coming over here, make sure all the switches are in the right position, and come across, gear down, trim in the right spot. We've been doing a little autopilot testing here, so it was auto trim. Throttles off, come over here, make sure everything is good, the normal pressurization, windshields off, come across here and stop. And now we basically back it up with a checklist. Cabin door, O2, switches and breakers we did, generators are on, we did that, standby gyro. Get that going. Anti-skid we did, throttles off, landing gears down, bleeder valves off, ground idle is in normal, and we'll put on the battery. And we'll set the parking brake. And now we do our old-fashioned rotary test here. Got the fire warning here. Yep, landing gear. Battery over temp is disabled here because we got a lead acid battery STC. Stick shaker's working. Thrust reversers. We do the windshield temp. Looking for the light to come on right there. That's good. Overspeed. Anti-skid. We got that coming. That should go off. And all the annunciators and lights are good. And that completes the test. We'll check the engine instruments. We got no flag. We'll check the fuel quantity. We'll be fueling a little later. And at this point, we will put the beacon on to start the engines. We're not going to do that, so we'll simulate that. We'll start the engines. That takes a minute or two. Once we start the engines, it's basically avionics on and inverters on. give that a little bit of time to spool up. And while we do that, we'll be programming the flight plan. We'll have a flight to Dallas today from San Antonio, and the route is Alamo 3, Alpha Golf Juliet, Ditzy, and Bucker 4 arrival. There, do our flight plan, do KSAT, and K Dallas, there, load procedure, departure, Alamo 3, AGI transition, load, and Backer, Backer 4, Ditzy transition, load, and then we'll double check it. Perfect. Go back, we'll set up a map page there, and we'll set up default nav here where we have distance to destination, VSR, which comes from the flight plan, altitudes, ETE, top of descent, so forth. So now we come over here and we'll set up the avionics. And we got to do a couple of things. Since we're flying a GPS approach, we got to switch the nav source on both sides from ILS or VOR nav to a GPS. So that's FMS 1 here. And we'll switch it to FMS 2 here, which is number 2 GPS. And then the other thing we got to do, we got to set up an altitude for takeoff. Let's say the clearance was fly the SID and top altitude was 4,000. We set up 4,000 here in the altitude pre-select. And now we engage the various modes of heading for the runway. We'll assume we take up 13 right. And we'll do a go around, so we get the command bars up, and we'll do altitude select and heading. So now we got heading, altitude select, go around mode here. So that's good. Now we go back to our checklist. We got the AC on, we got volts and amps. We'll check that. That works on both. We got the inverters to check. So we go. Make sure that inverter 1 fails when we do that. Make sure inverter 2 fails. That's the inverter check. We can set the pressurization to cruising altitude, which would be 27. Flaps are takeoff and approach. Trim as 1 correct, 2 correct, 3 correct. Controls free and correct. Set up transponder. This is where we would do the autopilot check, which we can do. We can engage it, and we'll make sure it disconnects on all, and then hold the test button, and that tests good. There we go. And then we'll engage it again. We'll do heading mode, make sure it goes back and forth, roll it up, roll it down. That all works pretty good. Disconnect and go around. Heading, altitude select. DG, I usually like to do a DG both sides. They're matching. Altimeter set here and here and here and here. Avionics flight plan are in. FMS nav have been selected. FMS 1, FMS 2. And we basically are up to taxi checklist and takeoff criteria on my checklist. Yeah, and that's the setup, and thanks for joining me in November 555 Echo Hotel Citation 5. Well, there's so many good things about the Citation 5. I love this airplane, and it'd probably be the last airplane I ever own. First of all, it has incredible flying characteristics. It cruises at 400, goes up to 430, has 3.5 to 4 hour range, which is about 16 to 1800 nautical mile range in no wind. So that's number one. Number two is with the gross weight increase, I get about 14 to 1500 pound payload with full fuel, which is impossible to beat in any cabin class aircraft like this. And then thirdly, the capital cost is incredible. I pay less than $1 million for this airplane, and we have an airplane that can basically go across the United States in one stop both ways with full cabin. Of course, It doesn't have quite the operating characteristics of some of the newer jets in terms of fuel burn. It burns about 150 to 160 an hour up high, compared to maybe 100 to 120 for some of the newer jets. But with the capital cost, it's an easy calculation to make it work. It's a very reliable airplane, but ever so often the avionics gives me some trouble because after all it is old avionics, and they are getting a little difficult to maintain from time to time. But overall it's a fantastic airplane, love it, fly it as much as I can, and will keep it as long as I can. So training in these airplanes is sometimes challenging because they have older avionics, but a lot of them have been upgraded. So we have a different set of cockpit configuration in these airplanes. Every airplane is almost different. So in the beginning I was training in an Ultra, which is technically a 560 as well as this one is, but it's completely different setup in the cockpit. So it wasn't quite a great experience. It was just too much learning of new avionics every time I went to training. So I did training in the aircraft, and that worked pretty good, doing V1 cuts and things like that. It just gives you confidence that these airplanes can handle everything that you can get with an engine out, and it flies very nicely. But lately I've been going down to flight safety and doing the Citation 2 simulator, which has a very similar setup in terms of avionics to this. It doesn't fly quite the same way because it's different weight and slightly different speeds, but trust me, the avionics similarity is so important to having a good training experience that I went with that, and I've been pretty happy with that. I'll probably alternate between an Ultra simulator in airplane and the Citation 2 simulator, but there are now some good options at flight safety where they're starting to match the avionics that we have upgraded to with the simulators. So all in all, you've got some options, but it is a challenge to find good training options for an airplane like this. So one of the things with the legacy Citation is that it has its own unique quirks and features, and we all learn to live with those. But if you fly different aircraft, particularly the newer Citations, so one of the gotchas in the legacies is the altitude select on the FMS Autopilot panel. If you fly a newer Citation, all you do when you get a new altitude call out from ATC is you dial in the altitude, you engage a vertical mode, and it captures when you get to that altitude. In a legacy, it's a little more complicated than that, and it's a gotcha. So let's say we're flying along at 4,000 feet and we get descend and maintain 3,000. So what you would do here is you would go 3,000 here. You would engage either a pitch mode like this, where you roll the pitch wheel down, and maybe you engage vertical speed to keep a vertical speed. If you don't hit this altitude select button here, it will not capture the altitude when you get there. So it's an extra step that will get you, and this is a gotcha that many of us have learned to live with, but if you come from a different Citation with a different set of avionics and autopilot, this will get you, I guarantee. So be mindful of the fact that you need to hit an altitude select button to capture an altitude when you use the altitude pre-select in a vertical mode on the legacy Citations. Yeah, so that's my Citation 5 555 Echo Hotel. It's a great airplane. It's easy to maintain, easy to fly, and just a lovely airplane that can take you far and fast. So thank you for looking at it, and I'm happy to show it. So thank you.